There's one thing I keep coming back to, one quality that Mario Cristobal needs to find in his next offensive coordinator.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. So what I keep coming back to, folks, and I'm going to bring on our special guest for this episode, who I always say he needs no introduction, but I give him one anyway. I still give him one. The legend, Larry Blustein, South Florida High School Sports, 560 WQAM, the six-ring cane. So, Blue, and you know Mario very well. You know him a lot better than I do. Right. But everyone that I talk to who's close to Mario, everything that I read, everything that I hear about the offensive coordinator search, and it's being kept very close to the vest. I feel like the number one trait that Mario looks for from a play caller is balance, someone who has successful balance. And it's unfortunate that I think maybe the best candidate for that is Jason Candle, who I don't expect to come here because he just signed that new deal with Toledo. And I know Mario likes him and went after him last year because if you look at Jason Candle's offenses in Toledo, it's like perfect balance between the run and the pass. So do you agree that that's probably a big thing that Cristobal is looking here for the next coordinator? He doesn't want an air raid. He wants to find balance.
Well, that's one of the things. I also think that he wants a coordinator that's going to be receptive to what his position coaches tell him. And certainly Gattis wasn't. And that, to me, you can't come in here and control the entire deal without getting input from your offensive line coach who has been around or your quarterback coach who you got to work closely with, or receivers or running backs or Fields at tight end. You've got to be receptive when you're sitting in meetings to listen to what these coaches have to say, whether you agree with it or not, but you have to listen. And you can't act like, what I say is going to go. Now, your ultimate decision is going to be made by the offensive coordinator like it was last year, but you have to be able to embrace what your fellow coaches will tell you. I mean, they may see things that you may not. And that's up to you to make the decision whether to utilize this or that. But that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think that balance is huge, but that takes care of itself. I think when you probably play on the personnel that you have. And right now, the Miami's running game, their quarterback, are pretty much a solid part of their offense. They're still searching for the receiver. So you can't be balanced without having the playmaker outside. They've got a lot of slot kids. They've got a lot of promise at tight end. But until, I think what's going to happen is during the spring, we're going to find out a lot more. And that's why I say it's essential to get an offensive coordinator in yesterday, because you got to start learning your people. You've got to, because that's the way you got to come in the spring and hit spring in a harder way than any other coaches are, because you're new to it. I mean, and you're new to the kids, the personnel, your fellow coaches, because the deal is you're most likely going to be the only guy that's going to be changed on the offense. They may pick another guy, but you have an offensive line coach who's been in place for a long time, a tight ends coach who's been here through the last couple of regimes. They have a running back coach who a lot of people like and respect. So you're coming in as an offensive coordinator, and you've got a lot to drink in. You've got to learn the kids. You've got to learn who can do what. And then and that's why I said that you've got to be receptive to what, if Stephen Fields comes in and says, hey, coach, this guy has done this and this guy has done that. And while I was recruiting him, I watched him do that. So you got to be receptive to that, especially year one. And then when you get things going, then you could pretty much make more of your decisions. But I think it's got to be pretty much a committee type of thing. You come in there with a lot of, because if you don't know your personnel, how are you going to use them? So, I mean, but to answer your question in a straighter form, yeah, I think that he is looking for a balanced offensive coordinator.
One of the reasons why I was excited to bring in your fresh perspective, because so much has changed since the last time I had you on, right? The job wasn't open the last time that I spoke to Larry Blustein on the show. And since that time, in all the episodes we've done since Friday, I've been throwing out probably the same 7 or 8 names pretty consistently. But you and I were talking off air before we started the show, and you brought up a name that I haven't mentioned yet this past, 4 or 5 days, and that's Jeff Scott, former head coach at USF. Do you believe Jeff Scott could be a good candidate or should be a good candidate for this offensive coordinator job?
Most definitely. Here's a guy. Look at Clemson over the years. He's the guy that orchestrated all of the, all those high-powered offenses. You look at the quarterbacks that he had under his tutelage in the time at Clemson. Going back to Taj Boyd, and obviously, some of the top guys over the last couple of years. 2 #1 draft picks. In that time, and plus his time as a young guy, learning and drinking in things. His dad was a coach at FSU, and he had an opportunity to be in a room, with the great Bobby Bowden, and he learned so much. I definitely think he would be a tremendous fit. And people bring up what happened at USF. He was thrown into the position at a tough time during the pandemic, so he really didn't get an opportunity, to start, from a running start. He had to kind of dig his way out. USF is not the most desirable place because they're just not they're not a Power 5 school. So then you can't go up against the Miamis and now the UCFs, which were their arch rivals, with a fair amount of credibility, without having to stretch things. So I think he really would be the one guy that I would go with because of the fact that I think he and Mario are on the same page as far as work ethic. And, I've got to know Jeff over the last couple of years while he was there, more so than I knew him before, because he used to recruit Florida, and I used to run into him when he was at Clemson. But to me, he seems like not to rule out anybody else. I know Scott Frost's name has been bantered, in that. Also Marcus Arroyo, who coached with him at Oregon, and he was in the same situation at UNLV because I, haven't gone there. I kind of watched that situation pretty closely. He was another one that was thrown into the wolves at a time when the pandemic was around, and UNLV. And also,
really I didn't watch UNLV the way that you did, being an alum, but it seemed like, obviously they weren't good from a win-loss standpoint, but it seemed like they were getting a little better every year. So it looked like the trajectory while Arroyo was there was going steadily upward.
No doubt. I mean, and you could see this year, even when they played Notre Dame, I mean, they went out there, they punched back, they, scored on long runs. They did a lot of good things. And, his big thing is when he inherited what Coach Sanchez had done for 5 years there, it really, they had like 1 AA type of kids. They didn't have, because there's a feeling, especially out west, that you rely on the 2nd and 3rd level California kids, when we know the 2nd level Florida kids would die to go out and be in a situation like that. And they have. But yeah, no, I like him. I like Arroyo. I know that he and Mario got along. Mario was his biggest advocate when he was going for the UNLV job. And, but, and then there's good and bad with Scott Frost. Scott is another guy who obviously knows offenses, has always been an open-minded guy. And I got a lot of real big chance to, know him over a couple of years from going to their camps and sitting down with him and Turner Gill, who, another Nebraska quarterback who came and, helped him out a little bit. Obviously, there's a couple of guys right there that kind of peg the meter, as far as that. There's other guys, obviously, who have been in the mix, but, Those are three guys that jumped out at me because of the work ethic. And you've got to work. I mean, people don't realize that if Mario Cristobal is in the office at 4:45 in the morning, your butt better be right there or on their way.
And not to mention, whoever gets this coordinator job is likely going to be a position coach, either at quarterbacks coach or wide receivers coach, in addition to being the OC.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that saves a few bucks too. So,
sure,
you know, yeah, I know. But the reason, I mean, and there's, like I said, there's other guys out there. Obviously, there's, you know, we've talked about quite a few of them over the last, you know, couple of weeks. But I think when you take a look at, you know, coaches like that, I think that you're looking at people who are progressive and people who could elevate the team. And that's what Mario Cristobal and that's what this offense really needs. Somebody to elevate this program and be able to think out of the box, obviously.
So we have a lot more coming up on this episode. We're only getting started here on Locked On Canes because the schedule did drop. Not only Miami's game schedule for next year, we also know when the spring football game is going to take place. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, folks, tomorrow is National Signing Day. Is it going to be a very quiet NSD for Miami, or could there be some surprises in store? No one better to tell me about that than Larry Blustein. Keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. No better place to go, my friends, for all the odds, info, and action than FanDuel. Folks, make this your spot, okay? We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because, hey, they are the #1 sports book in America. That's FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who's going to score a touchdown. Yeah, those props are great. So, guys, I'm looking at Philadelphia -1.5. I'm tempted to lock in Philly, but I'm going to wait to see if the line moves. I'm going to wait till all the information comes out game week, but it's going to be a big week next week. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/LockedOn to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make sure every moment becomes more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. Guys, I want to remind you that Locked On is out at the Senior Bowl. Get inside analysis from the hosts that cover the NFL's next generation in college and find out which NFL draft boards these players will be climbing. All in one location. Subscribe to Locked On NFL Draft for nightly live shows from the Senior Bowl on Tuesday, that's today, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. But we're back here on Locked On Canes talking with Larry Blustein. So, you know, Blue, heading into National Signing Day, from what I can tell, like the only big fish that Miami are still after, five-star athlete Nyckoles Harbor, who, you know, wants to play receiver or tight end at the next level. I think it's probably going to be South Carolina or Oregon there for him. And Jamel Howard, a 3-star defensive tackle who I know Miami would love to have, but he's a Chicago area kid, and it sounds like he and his family want him to be a little bit closer to home. So I'm thinking the Big Ten there. So I'm not expecting Miami to land either of these guys. Hopefully they surprise me pleasantly tomorrow, but I don't see a whole lot of other names on the radar, Blue. Do you think it's going to be a very quiet National Signing Day with Miami having done most of their work in the early signing period in December?
Yeah, I do. I think it's going to be, and it's on our radio show, we had representatives from Florida, Florida State, obviously Miami, USF, UCF. And the one thing that we found out is that Wednesday's going to kind of come and go. I mean, you know, FSU may add one. Florida already got a commitment yesterday, yesterday. So it is, because I think the remainder of the roster of basically all the teams, especially Miami, will be dictated by some of the guys who are in the transfer portal. and you know, and certainly they have the players on campus that they're going in the spring with, and then they'll see coming out of spring, because there's going to be a lot of kids that are going to be still out there. You know, after spring, they could always pick up a few more bodies like they did last year to kind of enhance. And I think that a lot of the players too will see, you know what, I saw the Miami spring game and they need this, and I think I could come in there, and before you know it, that's how it's going to be. I kind of missed the early February the first week of February national signing days, because there was great parties and there was a lot of anticipation, and we kind of get cheated out of that because now the December 20th day is coming right after the state championships, right before Christmas, and you don't get as much hoopla as you used to in the buildup. But the only reason they probably won't go back to a full first week of February signing is because a lot of these kids want to go in early. Yeah. And that's what happened in a lot of cases, that if you look at rosters, especially Miami, they have a lot of kids who signed, you know, in December that are already on campus. So
I think it was like 19, 20 of them already out of 24, 25. They're already on campus. Yeah.
And the only players don't ever get an opportunity to get on are the private school kids. So, you know, so now what you do is you try to sew up a little bit of the 23, and then you look at 2024 and then set the table for 2025. And but that's what this next couple of weeks is going to be about. Yeah, I'd like to see them get Nick Harbor, but the thing about him is he's a world-class sprinter. As big as he is. And so I think that's also on his mind. Not to say Miami doesn't have an outstanding track program. And because, you know, of the fact that, I mean, you're looking at somebody like T. Martin's son is coming to Miami to play baseball, you know. So, yeah, you never know. You never know in a situation. But I think it's going to be really quiet.
Well, and also, like with Harbor, how much harder do you think it is to get a commitment from him when you currently – don't have an OC or a wide receivers coach? I mean, so I don't know. It seems like it's kind of harder to close the deal from where I sit.
100%. You know, I mean, but like you said, stranger things have happened. I would send Mario Cristobal into a 12th hour deal before anybody else. So you never know.
Loafers.
You know, yeah. I mean, he's a closer. I mean, he's better than Lee Smith when it comes to closing.
I like it. So I did want to ask you, you know, Miami gets a new preferred walk-on, and they've been adding a lot of those lately. So let me give this young man his welcome to the U. Patrick Stepelton, wide receiver from Cardinal Gibbons. Welcome to the U. Local high school young man, Cardinal Gibbons. You've watched this player, I'm sure, in person. I didn't realize until you told me that Stepelton, he's a former quarterback converted to wide receiver. What are your thoughts?
I like him. Got some speed, big time kid. You know, I mean, here's a guy that a lot of people never even watched because they didn't ever figure that he was going to, you know, go to Miami or a school like that. But great family, great support. He was well coached in high school. Had an opportunity to watch him several times. You know, you watch him and he got open all the time, and he had tremendous hands. And, you know, I mean, that's one of the guys that, you know, who come to the next level, like a Lad McConkey, you know, that type of guy that a lot of people didn't really look at him at Georgia until he got there and started producing. And, you know, as well as I do, Alex, is I'm all about production. You know, you could take that hype when you could take about the promise and this guy's 6'4", 220. And throw it out the window, because at the end of the day, if he doesn't fill up the stat sheet, what good is he? And somebody like Stepelton will come in there and he'll start turning some heads, and he may force a lot of these kids to, you know, turn up their game a lot better, to know that here's a guy who's basically paying for his education that is posing some threat to you.
All right. So when we come back, the schedule is out, and it's like a tale of two schedules, right? Miami may start off incredibly hot for the first 5 games this coming season, and then things get a little bit tougher down the stretch. So we always love a good schedule release, and we'll have it for you right here on Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So, not only do we have the actual 2023 fall schedule, we also do have the spring football schedule came out. Now, the practices are not open to the public, but the spring game, April 14th at Drive Pink Stadium, formerly Lockhart Stadium, will be open. And Blue, you know this better than I do, or at least as well as I do, because I've been out to a handful of spring games. You probably haven't missed one in, God knows how many years. The spring games are always a good time. And, Drive Pink Stadium's a good venue. And if you're someone, based a little bit farther north, like if you're a North Broward person who doesn't get down to Hard Rock very often, or one of these Palm Beach Canes fans, I know there's a lot of you out there. It's probably a little bit easier to get down to Drive Pink Stadium, and I'm expecting a good time at that spring game, April 14th.
Yeah, I was there last year, and obviously there was a lot more anticipation because of the fact that here's Mario Cristobal, the prodigal son, returning. Yeah, and he put on a show last year. I remember watching him go into each of the ends, into the end zone, and and to greet the student body, and that's what that's all about. I mean, it's a like you said, it's a tremendous venue. We've had an opportunity to watch 12 football games there over the last couple of years in the state championship. And last year, I actually sat next to Joaquin Gonzalez's brother during the game, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be on a Friday evening, which will be cooler, and it'll be an opportunity for a lot of the kids to, I'm sure they're going to have a load of recruits there. And as you mentioned, it's right off of 95. So these kids can come down from Port St. Lucie or, areas that, normally wouldn't get an opportunity to watch University of Miami football. I mean, what's going to be going on a Friday night? Probably nothing on, on April 14th. So I think it's great. I think it's a great opportunity. I like having it there. And like you said, it kind of moves the fan base a little bit. Having it down at the University of Miami kind of pigeonholes you to getting people from South Miami, maybe just Southern Broward. But now you have people may even come over from Fort Myers, and they may come down for Tampa because, it's an opportunity for them to see, I know that Miami won't reveal a whole lot, but you'll get a chance to see some of the new faces, which are going to be great.
So the 2023 football schedule is officially out. Let me give you guys the order of the games and the dates, because that's what we didn't have. We knew the opponents, we just didn't know the exact order of when these games would happen. And Blue, Miami definitely has an opportunity to start the season 5-0 or 4-1 with the way this shakes out. You open up at home. Now, I don't take any win as automatic because we lost to Middle Tennessee last year, so I don't take any win for automatic. But you open up against Miami of Ohio, who, basically their offense was even worse than Miami of Florida's offense last year. Then you play home against Texas A&M, which is always going to be a tricky game. A&M obviously has a ton of players have left that program since last year. Home against Bethune-Cookman. No Ed Reed on the sidelines, unfortunately. The way that all transpired is unfortunate. So your first 3 games are at home against, some beatable opponents. Then you go at Temple, which should be a beatable opponent. Home against Georgia Tech, which was probably Miami's most complete performance last year, was their victory against Georgia Tech. So hopefully they can replicate that. And then it gets a lot tougher, Blue, after those first 5 games, because then you're at North Carolina. Mac Brown has been our daddy the last couple of years, sadly. Home against Clemson. I'm expecting Clemson to be even better this coming year, and they made a great hire, Garrett Riley, for their offensive coordinator. Home against Virginia, which hopefully is a winnable game. At North Carolina State, Brennan Armstrong now the quarterback there. At Florida State, they've got all the preseason hype, and they got Jordan Travis and Johnny Wilson, and their fans show up in our comments every day about how they're just going to absolutely destroy us. I hear from Florida State fans constantly. Home against Louisville, and then at Boston College, which will hopefully be a winnable game to end the year. So it's obviously, it is what it is. It's not an easy schedule. Remember, no more divisions this year. So it's just the top 2 teams from the ACC, which in my opinion, Blue, that makes it harder to make the ACC championship game, because on paper, the top 2 teams should be Clemson and Florida State, who used to be in the same division. Now, if they end up with the top 2 records, they're going to be the teams in the championship game. But definitely the first half of the schedule, pretty soft compared to the second half.
No doubt. Ironically, I was at the last game that Miami played Miami of Ohio. I think it was 1987.
Wow.
They crushed them. It was 54-3, and those are back.
Well, either way, Miami was going to win that game either way.
Yeah, Miami was winning either way you looked at it. And yeah, no, for some crazy reason that thing has hung into my head all those years, and I think I still got the game program from that game. And
wow,
yeah, how ironic. But yeah, like you said, I mean, you have Miami of Ohio, and you know, I mean, they should. A&M is going to be a challenge still, you know, big team, promising team, underachieved so greatly last year. So there's a lot of pressure on the highest paid guy in the land to win games. Bethune-Cookman is right now spinning all over the darn place. It looked like a pretty good, attractive, you know, meeting to have Ed Reed as the head coach, but that's not happening. Then Temple, but a trip. You know, I'm saying right now, like you said, Middle Tennessee State last year, you don't take anything for granted. But Temple shouldn't really be in that. But then after the Georgia Tech game, it gets a little dicey because I still think North Carolina, you had mentioned Florida State being basically a runner-up to Clemson. I think North Carolina still got the goods.
Drake May
probably undoubtedly the best quarterback in the country, and somebody who gave everybody fits last year. They're at home at Kenan Stadium, which is not an easy place to play. Miami notoriously hasn't done very well. And then you come back home against Clemson, which is no slam dunk. You know, they showed that they have a really, really good football program. They've reloaded in a lot of ways. Things lighten a little bit against Virginia, a team that you should win. But then I look at the last 4 games, and you have North Carolina State, who have always been tough. I mean, you know, as far as, I mean, and you have them at Carter Finley, which is another place that not easy. If you remember a couple of years ago, Miami played there and won like 36-35 or 40, you know, a 1-point game. So that's not a gimme. Florida State, obviously, Miami was embarrassed, just totally embarrassed this last year at home. They want some measure, but still, as you said, Coach Mike Norvell's done a tremendous job with the Seminoles. Louisville's not going to be a break either. I think what they've done, you know, adding Coach Brom, and he signed undoubtedly one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and Clarkson, whose dad is a guru at quarterbacks. Plus, they added quite a few kids. And then you go to Boston College, which on the surface you say, well, we should win that. But again, Chestnut Hill, you know, I right after Thanksgiving, and it's, you know, it's a Friday game. Should be interesting because Miami, like I said, they don't usually play well, you know, in that place. But there's a couple of really, like you said, they could go 4-1, 5-0 off the start, but they've got to at least come away 1-1 against Clemson and North Carolina. They've got to. I mean, to have any hope for a 9-10 win season. And then the last 3 out of 4, they've got to win at least 3 out of those last 4, and then you're talking about 9-win season, and something that I'm sure fans would take. I just want them to get to a bowl game because I looked at the junk that was in bowl games this year, and you figure yourself, how did Miami not go to a game? I mean, you've got teams like Rice and programs like that, Eastern Michigan, and how can Miami not be in a bowl? So to me, in this, you know, in taking strides for the future, bowl game first, improve yourself and set the table for 24. I would like to see them win 9 games. It could be tough, but I mean, you know, but as a Hurricane fan, you would like them, you know, to go in there and say, okay, they're going to win 9 or 10 games. But we learned last year when we were picking them to win 10 and 11 games, that it's not so automatic. You have to have the personnel. And, you know, on our 6 Ring Canes podcast, we talked about the very thing. And you also have to remember this, Alex. Even though Miami's upgraded and great coaching staff, tremendous personnel coming in, a lot of good transfers, great freshman class, the other teams in the ACC aren't sitting on their hands. I mean, they're doing the same thing. North Carolina's bringing marquee kids. It's a take it at each week as they come, see how people respond. But I'm optimistic that a lot of the kids who are veterans are going to step it up a little bit. And there was a lack of leadership last year, and by getting a couple of older players in there, I think that could be remedied.
And Blue said it about learning lessons. I am a recovering preseason hype addict. I'm not gonna make any win-loss predictions until we're like most of the way through fall camp. Like I know everybody's doing it for clicks, like every other show out there. Like, oh, guys, I see 9 wins. I did that last year, Blue. I predicted, I think, 9 regular season wins and 10 with a bowl game, and I look like a buffoon. So why would I do that to myself again? At least not until August. Like, you guys are not going to get anything out of me until you guys are not going to get anything out of me in terms of a win-loss prediction until August. I'm going to marinate on this until then. I want to see how spring football goes and fall camp goes, and I want to wait till the transfer portal. It's going to reopen and close again in May. I'm waiting for all of that. And I'm always in the gratitude here of Larry Blustein, who does a tremendous, tremendous job. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Larry Blustein and Blue. We'll talk to you again next time.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode of Locked On Canes. And make sure for your second listen, you listen to Locked On College Basketball. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big-name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you next time on another Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.